Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. We are excited to have you join us once again. If this is not your first time, if this is your first time, welcome. We hope you'll stay around for another episode after this one. We're here to talk all things, well, maybe not all things, but security and compliance related items. This week, Mila and I wanted to share with each other, so we're going to share with you kind of what we do on a daily, weekly basis to kind of keep up to date on cybersecurity and compliance stuff. Because obviously it's a very hot environment. There's so many things happening. I mean, you could probably fill your newsfeed with just the breaches in the last hour. Could be a news feed in and of itself that would overwhelm you. But obviously there's a lot of meta stuff around that, stuff that people can do to help to keep up. So that's our topic for today. What do you think, Milo?
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Cool.
I think I can kind of segue into our first section because I think we want to talk about podcasts. And I think you listen to more security podcasts than I think I do. Obviously, you and I, we have our own security podcast here at Socializing Security, but I would love to hear from you kind of what are the ones that you have in your queue that you like to listen to learn more about security in general or some of the like main kind of breaches that are going on?
Yeah. I'm a huge podcast nerd. And it's a tough balance because there's way too many good podcasts out there. And then I go and create my own to try and add to the clutter even further. So I do a pretty broad mix of things. So I don't have a lot of cybersecurity that I listen to on a regular basis because there's a lot of other interest areas that I get into that I try to keep my audio listening broad and not fall down any one particular rabbit hole. But my main one is one that is a daily kind of update podcast is called Cybersecurity Headlines. That's by the CISO series. So every morning when I wake up, that's like the first thing in my queue. I listen to that kind of when I'm getting ready in the morning, just to kind of understand what's going on. It's usually really fast paced, about 10 minutes. Hear the headlines from the last 24 hours type of thing. And then they do once a week. They kind of do they bring on CISOs or people that are kind of broad ranging security people on to talk about some of the key news sources over the week, and usually deep dive into one little bit broader topic each time. So for me, that's been kind of a good just to kind of know what's being talked about, what the buzz is type of thing. I'm a fan of Darknet Diaries. I know there's some questions as to how truthful the podcast can be. I've had some people say, "Oh, I stopped listening to that because it's clearly some of the stuff is a little bit fiction mixed into it." I listen to it more from the broad sense of things. Like it's a good story, regardless of how 100% true it is or not.
Mm-hmm.
It comes.
Can you give an overview of kind of what they cover?
Yeah. Darknet Diaries is it's a single host. He's been doing it for a long time. In fact, I think he's eventually made it his job. Like he does this full time now. And he definitely does a lot of research, a lot of understanding a story. He'll oftentimes go back to like, hey, let's go back to the first phone hack, pre-computer hacking type stuff. Sometimes he'll kind of dig into a single threat actor group and kind of dissect what they've done and how they've done it and the people involved and that kind of thing. So it can be pretty broad ranging, but the whole concept is to tell stories from the dark side of the internet, to talk about not just hacking, but he gets into SIM swapping and credit card stealing and things that may not necessarily just be about cybersecurity hacking type stuff, but more broad about just what are the things that go on that thing we call the dark web. So the stories are usually pretty interesting. To me, it's been a good insight into the psychology of the people that get involved in doing these kind of illicit activities, understanding how they think, what they do, how they go about it, that kind of thing. I've listened through the whole back catalog. It's been a long road because there's a lot of episodes. He used to do it bi-weekly, I think it was. And around 2 years ago, pivoted to doing it kind of once a month type thing. So they've gotten a little bit longer, but less frequent. So they kind of they go kind of more into my kind of story queue, where, when I'm doing yard work and stuff, when I need hours of content sometime and I want to listen to more long form type stuff, it kind of goes into that one. The other one that I listen to that's not really cybersecurity focused, but I know the co-host for it is what used to be called the Cloudcast, is now called the Enterprise AI Show. So they're used to talk about all things cloud. They started talking more and more about AI. They rebranded as an AI podcast, but obviously in both of those places, security pops up often. So, just kind of not necessarily directly associated with the security side of things or the compliance side of things, but more on the adjacent industry side of things. And then there's a few that I'll listen to as I see things pop up. So within the CISO series, it's a family of different podcasts. So there's one called the CISO series. There's one called Defense in Depth, both of which are kind of when a topic catches my interest or they talk about it on another podcast, I'll add that one to my queue. So I'm not getting the every day. It's not checking for new episodes type of thing. There's been a handful of others that I listen to on and off when topics pop up. Breaking Through in Cybersecurity Marketing, being that's kind of what I do for a living. Of course, we've had AJ Nash on in the past, so Unspoken Security was his podcast, or is his podcast. He's still doing it. And so that's one I'll listen to on occasion. It's not every episode type of thing. And then one that's near and dear to both of us is the Tech Field Day podcast. That one I listen to pretty regularly. It's not always security focused topics. Just like Tech Field Day, they're all over the place. They have a lot of different things. But they do also have a kind of news of the week show that I listen to pretty semi-regular. It's usually one of the first ones I cut, just because if I don't listen to it during the week, then that's one that gets backed up pretty quickly, and it's a little bit more long form for that one too. But off a lot of security conversations. I've been on that one in the past.
They cover like networking, AI, security, and a lot of different topics, and they have some really awesome speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a lot there. I've been on both of those from Tech Field Day before, and it's oftentimes okay, let's not just fill it with this is the latest breach, because from a security perspective, it's pretty easy to fall into that trap. So that's a lot. We can include links in the show notes for all of these, so you can go look them up yourself. But yeah, it's very much a choose your own adventure. There's plenty of content out there, and of course, there's tons that I know about that I didn't even put on the list. Milo, any podcasts that you would recommend besides your own?
I would recommend our own, but yes, I also follow the CISO series. So that's the other one that I definitely have listened to and tuned in and have learned a lot just about some of and then the Darknet Diaries ones, I agree. Those can be pretty captivating. They are longer, but those are probably the two that I've definitely listened to on the security specific focus that I think I would absolutely recommend for those that are kind of looking for more content and want to learn a little bit more.
Yeah. Big fan of podcasts. It's an easy way to multitask. Fill your brain when you're doing more physical activities.
Awesome. Are there any blogs or newsletters that you'd like to follow that kind of come into your queue that help you stay abreast of any changes in news or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't follow blogs regularly like I used to. I think they've fallen a little bit out of vogue as a regular update, regular watch type situation. Just because social media has kind of eaten its lunch a little bit, the microblogging concept. There's a bit of a resurgence with it, with Substack and being able to do more newsletter type focused rather than blog type focused. So I don't have a lot of those. Brian Krebs is one that I do have in my RSS feed. So krebsonsecurity.com. He's been a longtime researcher in this space, and most of his stuff I don't read thoroughly because he will post very infrequently because he does a lot of really, really, really deep research into botnets and the cyber criminal networks and things like that. So he does a lot of investigative journalism type stuff that gets way deeper than I've got time for, I guess is the best way to put it. I would love to spend the time reading it because it's endlessly fascinating. But it's the kind of stuff that it's a bit like Dark Knight Diaries occasionally, where it's like, hey, here's the full story. Here's what's going on in this space. Which unfortunately for me, reading on the screen isn't as easy as consuming via podcasts. So that's one space where, I just don't get enough time to sit down and read much. So I don't have much of that in my feed. How about you?
Yeah, for me, I definitely get like news beats from the International Association of Privacy Professionals, the IAPP. That's where I get a lot of my updates to like major privacy laws or major things that have changed on the privacy side, and really general compliance stuff. They kind of cover both. So they're in my inbox all the time posting different updates. So I would recommend that one specifically on the privacy and the compliance side of the house. And then one of the other groups that I also follow is the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics, SCCE. They also post some regular updates. They're more like general corporate compliance, so less specific on like the information security side. And then some of the other places that I get information to would be some of the audit firms that I work with directly. They'll post regular articles and send out emails that are pretty relevant, and share some really great updates on major changes in laws or things that they're seeing kind of across audits and stuff like that. So that's another area where I would recommend kind of making sure that you have your list of vendors that you're kind of following. Audit firms can be a really great source of information for that too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that kind of goes with the general, any vendor you're working with, or even respect, whether you're working with them or not. They're a great source of information. They usually have newsletters and posts and potentially podcasts and things like that too. I know, obviously, I work for a vendor, so I'm not going to speak too much to what's going on in that space. I mostly pay attention to those companies that we work with as partners. There are a few others that are out there that, again, don't religiously follow, but we'll check up on, businesses my friends work for, because, I'll see them on LinkedIn and things like that more frequently than the random things. Experience with Tech Field Day has introduced me to a few really good companies that are out there that seem to be fighting the good fight as much as they are trying to sell their own products. So those are the ones I tend to more focus on. But again, none of them are super structured for me. They're just kind of as they pop up on my feed.
Yeah, I would say for me, some of the vendors specifically in the information security side that I follow, in terms of like pretty awesome updates in their newsletters and stuff, would be like kind of the main GRC, the government risk and compliance vendors like OneTrust, Strata, and Vanta. They have dedicated teams that are posting pretty regular updates on major changes. Again, things that they're seeing in audit, as well as just like major changes to regulations. So I definitely keep an eye out for their content. I'd say OneTrust is really strong in this particular area. They post some really awesome content. So if you're trying to learn a little bit more on the information security side, I would definitely recommend checking out their stuff, seeing if you can sign up for their communications so that you can just kind of see what they're up to, because I think their stuff is really relevant and super helpful.
Yeah, one that I think maybe I should call out that I've always found very useful is Mandiant. So if you're not familiar with Mandiant, they were kind of the first like incident response company out there. They became one of the first ones to really start tracking and sharing their information about threat groups out there. So when we talk about kind of the premier incident response, being able to have intelligence feeds, Mandiant's kind of one of the gold standards out there. Of course, there's a lot of others that have come up that are just as good these days, like CrowdStrike and whatnot. But Mandiant got bought by Google, so Google Threat Intelligence is kind of more where they live these days. And some of the stuff they've posted is I've had to research, hey, what did this attack look like? They're oftentimes one of the first ones that I'll go look at to see how they wrote it up, because they usually do a pretty good job of writing it up and maintaining it as the data changes.
And then if we kind of turn to social media, obviously there are so many content creators that are posting things on security compliance related topics, especially also in information security. There's one that I like to follow, which is Digital Byte, BYTE. I believe she works in networking for Cisco, but she posts a lot of great content related to like her career, being a remote worker, as well as like being a part of the world of security and technology. So she's definitely somebody that I like to follow and see what she's up to. I think she travels full time now. So I don't even know if she has an apartment per se, but I think she travels and works remotely full time, which is super cool. So she has an interesting story, but she posts a lot of regular content about what it's like working at Cisco and kind of what it's like being like a network engineer in tech.
Yeah, social media is an interesting one because there are no lack of good resources out there. I personally have gone from having too much social media in my life to having almost no social media in my life these days. As I think we've talked about in the past. So it's one of those situations where, again, I don't have a very definitive list. I should maybe put together a list of people that I do follow. The challenge with social media these days is that things are very distributed. It used to be, Facebook or Twitter, and occasionally LinkedIn. And nowadays it's much more distributed because of things that have happened with Twitter over the years. A lot of people choosing to not be a part of Facebook whatsoever, and being able to then find people across Mastodon and Blue Sky and Instagram, and LinkedIn's become much more heavy. At that point, you're really like, you can follow people. Most of these platforms by default, you're going to be at the whim of the algorithm, which pick your poison when it comes to the algorithm, and which one you trust to give you what you want. It generally means you're not always going to see every person's post, everything that everybody puts out there, because there's too much to consume in one day. What little social media I do is pretty curated. I would say the one place to start, I think when Twitter kind of went down, most of the InfoSec community jumped ship and moved over to Mastodon primarily. So I think that's still the place where most security people really are hanging out and having really kind of the main conversations out there. So the best place to start, if you don't know anything about Mastodon, just go out to infosec.exchange, I believe is kind of the main Mastodon server where a lot of InfoSec people went to. Just kind of see what's going on that server. Mastodon's kind of weird where it's super distributed, so you can sign up on any server and then it connects into a broader network of different Mastodon servers. So you don't have to be a part of that one to see what these people are talking about. You can join that one. You can join another one to be able to see kind of what's being talked out there. But that's the one that I see most of the InfoSec community hanging out on. And so that's a good place to start there.
Yeah. And then I think if we think about when something happens where we're really going for news, I think obviously there are a lot of security specific outlets that I think we kind of want to talk through, that are ones that I definitely go to if I'm looking up an incident, especially if I'm trying to also send information to employees so that they can learn more about a particular cybersecurity event. Some of the ones, like I definitely rely on the Hacker News a good amount. And I think you called out Dark Reading, and that's another one that I definitely follow along a lot. So those are ones that I would definitely go to if I'm trying to get accurate information that's hopefully a little bit less biased, that I can learn more about a particular event.
Yep. Dark Reading's one that, when I'm researching a topic, I'll go to their site as one of the first search results. I don't necessarily go to any of these sites on a regular basis, but when I see articles being shared by friends, when I see Google results that come back with one of these sites, I generally will click on it. So Dark Reading's up the top there. Bleeping Computer's another good one that has a lot of security focused content that seems well researched and reported. Security Week's pretty decent. And then Wired, as always, has a wide range of content, one of which is security, but they've Man, I remember getting the magazines for Wired back in the day. And it was always a treat when those showed up in the mailbox. So it's like, yes, Wired's here. And then I'd read about a third of the articles because they're so in depth, they're so deep. And Wired's an interesting one because they're going all over the place these days. It's a bit like Rolling Stone. Like Rolling Stone's doing politics news and doing technology news, and it's not just about the music industry anymore because everything's so tied that all of a sudden, like somebody finds they went down a path and now they're in a completely different space, but they're like, it's doing well, so let's keep reporting on that space. So yeah, a lot of really great ones that, I mean, there's a lot of really good news outlets out there. Some of them do overlap with some of the podcasts and newsletters and blogs that we talked about, because again, we even had a category for video channels on here, but it's just like, yeah, the main video channels I watch are the ones that I also listen to as my podcasts. So yeah, if you prefer video content over audio content, take all the podcast recommendations and go search them on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. And then there are definitely also government groups that you can follow either through their newsletters or just for regular updates. And I think the two that we called out are CISA and NIST. CISA is the Cyber Security Infrastructure
something agency.
Yeah.
We should look up our acronyms.
Yes. But they have some really great content too, especially if you're trying to build out how to stay safe online. They have a lot of articles on how to do that. And then NIST would be an area where you can get a lot of the special publications specifically related to some of the major changes like the AI Act and how to implement like the cybersecurity risk framework and stuff like that. So those can be some really helpful resources as well.
Yeah, and there's a ton of them. We didn't bother listing all of them out. We've talked about some of them. CSA's another one. There's each country has their own version of a CISA organization. Most of us kind of know them, but we may not watch them regularly. But yeah, if you want to understand, hey, what's the next release of the this cybersecurity framework going to be? Well, go out to NIST site and go take a look, and maybe you want to participate in the next revision of it because they do have that capability. So paying attention to what they're doing is going to be very indicative as to where things are going. Very closely related to those, though, end up being kind of industry groups. So, rather than a government telling you what the regulations are, what you need to do, oftentimes there are industry-focused groups. So we've talked about it before. I work a lot within healthcare, so those were the ones that came to mind. We've talked about the HIMSS conference. Well, HIMSS is an organization that does a lot of work to help their member organizations be more secure. So there's a lot of good content there. They do a lot of in-person meetups and stuff like that. The American Hospital Association's another one that I found to be really, really kind of cool. They've got some really good leadership going on there that have come out of more of the government, Department of Justice type of organization. So they've been doing state level security. And gotten involved in more the hospital side of things. So there's some really, really cool stuff that you can find in there. Of course, from the financial industry space, if you're in the manufacturing space, there are industry groups within there, some of which may focus specifically on that. Even within healthcare, you can talk about the one that is in Nebraska and the one that's in Texas. And there are all sorts of industry groups all over the place, big and small. So if you're working in a specific industry, go searching for them because they will have stuff that is designed specifically for you, essentially. Speaking of in-person events, that's kind of the last bit that we have here. So, I talked about HIMSS being both a large conference and small regional conferences. There are one of my favorite things to do is to go to local security cons. So there's all sorts of cool ones. They're all named really cool because they're innovative people, quite frankly. That's one of the things I love about the cybersecurity space over some of the other IT focused spaces is that a lot of those really creative people like to get into cybersecurity. I don't know if it's the whole, hey, let's figure out how to break into things or building things is a big thing for security people. But really creative type stuff. So like in Nebraska, where I live, the annual security conference is called KernelCon, playing both off of the kernel of corn as well as the kernel of a computer. And so they play that up pretty heavily, and they always have a really fun theme every year. And I've been to all sorts of different ones in different cities around the U.S. And so there's a lot of really fun ones. Look for one that's driving distance from you and go visit it. Go meet some people. Go hear what people are doing. They're usually fairly small, and therefore opportunity for regular people to get up and talk about what they're doing in their environment and provide a perspective that you may have never heard before. And then, of course, there's always road shows and stuff like that. Again, look at your vendors, maybe having things. Look at, talk to if you're working with a VAR, an MSP, or an MSSP, ask them where they're going to be, because those may be events that you want to potentially go to, because if they see value in it, then you may find value in it as well. So lots of really cool in-person things to do. And of course, I guess we probably should mention RSA conference.
Yeah, I'd say
well.
RSA and Black Hat and Red Hat are probably the bigger ones on the security side, beyond kind of some of the smaller local ones, but those are probably the big three. Yeah.
And then you also find B-Sides is another concept that came out of, I think it came out of Black Hat originally, but it essentially is hey, if you didn't get accepted to the main conference, we're going to do a half-day conference beforehand, and we're going to try to get through as many B-Sides as we could. The stuff that didn't get published as the official stuff, we'll do unofficially. And that's grown into local conferences as well. So I know, like, for me, Kansas City, I think, is the closest one, which I've yet to make it to, but I've tried like 3 years in a row, but it hasn't worked out. So yeah, lots of good opportunities there.
Yeah, well, I think that kind of wraps up kind of where we try to get some of our extra knowledge and insights from the community when we're trying to also just kind of expand what we've got going on in the security space.
Yeah. So definitely in the nature of learning with you all, as we go through topics, that's, I've got a few things I think I'm going to throw into my feed that you suggested me, Lou, and try to get a little bit broader view of things. So hopefully it was helpful to everybody. I'll do my best to make sure that we've got as many of these things linked into the show notes. So feel free to go down there and browse through those things. Until next week, we appreciate you all joining us. And any feedback, info@socializingsecurity.com. We'd love to hear from you. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.